Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley in Black Mountain. I'm Rose Levering. I'm a member of the board. What do Unitarian Universalists believe in? It's a question that we're often asked. The UU Association explains UU beliefs this way. In Unitarian Universalism, you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, your expansive heart. Together, we create a force more powerful than one person or one belief system. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't have to check our personal background and beliefs at the door. We join together on a journey that honors everyone, everywhere we've been before. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. We have no shared creed. One of our shared covenants or principles supports the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Though Unitarianism and Universalism were both liberal Christian traditions, this search has led us to embrace diverse teachings from Eastern and Western religions and philosophies. Unitarian Universalists believe more than one thing. We think for ourselves and reflect together about important questions. We're building an action-oriented community, bringing races, religions, and creeds with a shared desire to make the words faith, religion, and spirituality into verbs. What we do with our beliefs is important. It's how we walk our talk, how we make our faith real. We have a couple of announcements today. The Communications Committee is looking for a chair, so if anyone's looking to lead communications in the church, please reach out to Damaris in the office. Also, we have some words for Deb Ivanchek from Building and Grounds. And let me just read them to you. There's some changes that have been made to make the building look better and also add to the safety and security for those attending. Painting was completed in the foyer, the RE room, and the nursery. New heating and cooling, air circulation systems were installed. In addition, effective immediately, those who access the UUCSV building at times other than Sunday service will find a few changes. A sign-in log can be found on the table in the portico. We ask the person who first enters the building and the person who locks up the building to enter their names and other information on the sign-in log. We changed the number to the key lockbox located on the south side of the building. If you need access to the building at a time when the building's locked, please contact Ray or Deb, and their contact info is in the directory to find out the new code. Since there are steps we're taking to maximize the efficiency of our new HVAC system, and since locking the outside door can be tricky, you may be asked to meet with either Ray or Deb at the building to review the new procedures. Today, we are on our way to opening the building.
So it's official that we're opening next month? In-person Sunday services resume in 3 weeks on July 11th at 11 o'clock a.m.
Let the service begin.
All right, good morning, and thank you for joining us this Sunday as we get closer and closer to hopefully seeing you live here in the flesh. Our opening words this morning are from the Reverend Bruce Southworth. As we gather, we light this chalice as a symbol of hope, and may the inner light within each of us be kindled each and every day. May the light of truth be a part of our lives constantly. And may we seek always to bring light wherever the deep shadows fall. Our opening hymn this morning is an old standard. It's hymn number 273, Immortal Invisible. Hymn number 273. Our reading this morning, number 547 in the back of the gray hymnal, 547. It's called Summer Meditation. Now blows the wind with soft, relaxing warmth. The sun beats down. The schools are out. Children swarm in the playgrounds and the streets, and eager city folk, vacation bound, crowd the broad highways. Ugh. The lakes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I was once one of those city-bound people. The lakes and seashores lose their solitude, and all the world seems turned to carnival. What of ourselves? There could be now, if we were fortunate, a deep peace, a time for soul searching. We might turn to examine our own lives, to sort and probe our tendencies of thought, to sift the true from the false in the things of doubt, the beautiful from ugliness unmarked. The sun beats down. It's time for a pause. Even the trees seem resting for a time, as if to meditate and gather strength for the more strenuous times that most certainly lie ahead. And shall not we? Here's the unfinished day, half molded, that still waits on us, to think what we have been, and so we are, and yet still have time to become. This is the time in our service when we invite you to share a joy, a concern, and without further ado, the floor is yours.
Jerusalema is a line dance to a catchy tune by South African Master KG. Our congregation got together recently to show off the steps at Lake Tomahawk. It's easy to join in.
For those of you who, for whatever reason, decided not to share a joy or concern, know that we keep you in our hearts and in our minds. We have a treat from the choir this morning, The Sweet June Days. Okay, choir, take it away.
The sweet June days are come again, once more the glad earth yields its golden wealth of ripening grain and breath of clover fields, and deep green shade of summer woods, and glow of summer air, and ringing thoughts and happy roots of love and joy and prayer. The sweet June days are come again, the birds are on the wing, bright anthems in their merry strain, unconsciously they sing. Oh, how our cup o'erbrims with good these happy summer days, for all the joys of field and wood, we lift our song of praise. The sweet June days are come again, once more the glad earth yields its golden wealth of ripening grain and breath of clover fields, and deep green shade of summer woods, and glow of summer air, and ringing thoughts and happy roots of love and joy and prayer. The sweet June days are come again, the birds are on the wing, bright anthems in their merry strain, unconsciously they sing. Oh, how our cup o'erbrims with good these happy summer days, for all the joys of field and wood, we lift our
Good morning. My name is Susan Enright Hicks, and I'm delighted to offer you this morning's meditation, Father's Day Prayer by Kirk D. Lodeman Copeland. Let us praise those fathers who've striven to balance the demands of work, marriage, and children with an honest awareness of both joy and sacrifice. Let us praise those fathers who, lacking for a good role model of a father, have worked to become a good father. Let us praise those fathers who, by their own account, were not always there for their children, but who continue to offer those children, now grown, their love and support. Let us pray for those fathers who have been wounded by neglect or hostility of their children. Let us praise those fathers who, despite divorce, have remained in their children's lives. Let us praise those fathers whose children are adopted and whose love and support has offered healing. Let us praise those fathers who, as stepfathers, freely chose the obligation of fatherhood and who have earned their stepchildren's love and respect. Let us praise those fathers who have lost a child to death and continue to hold the child in their heart. Let us praise those men who have no children, but who cherish the next generation as if they were their own. Let us praise the men who have fathered us in their role as mentors and guides. Let us praise those men who are about to become fathers. May they openly delight in their children. And let us praise those fathers who have died, but who live on in our memory and whose love continues to nurture us. May it be so.
Thank you, Susan. Very lovely. Okay, let's get to it. This is the time when we invite you to be as generous as you can. We're opening soon, and so we need you here. We need your talent. We need your resources. We need your energy. And so ahead of time, I'm going to thank you for your generosity. We will now collect this morning's offering. Now we have another gem from our choir, a song called Somos el Barco. Somos el Barco.
Somos el barco, somos el mar, yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me.
The stream sings it to the river sings it to the sea sings it to the boat that carries you and me.
Somos el barco, somos el mar, yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me.
The boat we are sailing on was built by many hands. The sea we are sailing on reaches many lands.
Somos el barco, somos el mar, yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea, I sail in you, you sail in me.
The voyage has been long and hard, and yet we're sailing still, with a song to help us pull together, if we only will.
Somos el barco, somos el mar, yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea, I sail in you, you sail in me.
So with our hopes we raise the sails to face the winds once more, and with our hearts we chart the waters never sailed before.
Somos el barco, somos el mar, yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea, I sail in you, you sail in me.
Alrighty, this is Father's Day. So I remember telling you, well, maybe I didn't tell you. Anyway, there's a Ghanaian word, and it's from the language Akan, Akan or Akan, A-K-N, A-N, and it means Sankofa, and it means looking back while still going forward. And usually there's a bird. The symbol is a bird. The body is going forward and the head is looking back. Not to live in the past, obviously, but that sometimes we can glean the lessons from the past as we go into the future. And so that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. Now, if you have children around, I want you to be careful. Some of the language will be mentioning the word God. I don't want to offend any of you. Our culture tries to tell us as men what our roles and identities should be. Now that is changing. Lord knows it is, and nowhere soon enough. But we're being told as men what is woman's work, or mother's work, what is not. This is what it means to be a man, etc., etc., etc. And women in our culture, women and mothers, well, maybe not just our culture actually, but are supposed to be more aware of the needs of others. And by that is to say that women give birth, and which seems the most intimate connection that seemingly one person can have with another person. And perhaps there is some truth to that. I'm not here to debate that. Obviously, that connection, being a life giver is what sustains us as a culture, as a species. And so there is some truth in what our society tells us, but the real point to my mind is this, that men are also capable of deep sensitivity to the needs and the interests of another person. We too are capable of treating people as ends in themselves rather than as means to our own ends. And we too are capable of unselfish love towards others. We can also be nurturing and vulnerable and still be men. And I believe that this unselfish love is tied to two basic liberal religious principles that are found in Unitarianism and Universalism. Not only there, but we're UUs, and so this is what I want to talk about. So I'm going to be using the words of a UU Christian minister from the 19th century. You've heard of him, William Ellery Channing. Walk with me, because the language is archaic, but it's where we were at the time, and still ahead of the curve, as I'll point out. Channing says, we believe, UUs, and this is the 19th century now, that God is infinitely good, kind, benevolent in the proper sense of these words, good in disposition as well as in act, good not to a few, but to all, good to every individual as well as to the general system of things. To give our views of God in one word, this is still Channing, we believe in his parental character. We ascribe to him not only the name, but the dispositions and principles of a father. We believe that he has a father's concern for his creatures, a father's desire for their improvement, a father's equity in proportioning his commands to their powers, a father's joy in their progress, a father's readiness to receive the penitent, and a father's justice for the incorrigible. We look upon this world as a place of education in which he is training men by prosperity and adversity, by aids and obstructions, by conflicts of reason and passion, and by motives to duty and temptation to sin, by various disciplines suited to free and moral beings, for union with himself and for a sublime and ever-growing virtue in heaven. Now, if you haven't turned me off yet, just hang in. So in this reading, you and I, we hear a classic statement of Unitarianism dated back from 1819 from UU Christian minister William Ellery Channing. Now, note that the heresy there, that this father is the parent, but there's no judgment there. And I'll go on. Universalists clear this up for us. In the reading, Channing meditates on what it means to talk about God as a father. He tells us that if we're going to talk about God as a kind of father, then we must not just call God Father, but also we must incorporate the best characteristics of the good father. If we're going to talk about God as father figure, then we must affirm that such a God will have the same unstinting love for others that a good father has for his children. And that's what I want you to hear. And I'll bring it up to the present day, is this is why people were burned at the stake and were excommunicated and called heretics and everything but a child of God, because of this love ethic. Unitarians touched upon it, Universalists took it and ran with it. But the same desire that others may improve themselves, this is what a good father feels for his children. The same equity that a good father displays. The same joy in the progress of others that a good father takes in the progress of his children. the same willingness to forgive that a good father feels toward his children, and the same ability to mete out justice when it is needed that a good father has with his children. Now, granted, this is hopelessly idealistic, at least to 21st century ears. What human being can live up to such a vision of fatherhood? And yet this old Unitarian description of God the Father is meant to describe a religious ideal to help guide us as fallible human beings. Channing gives us a religious principle, an ideal of fatherhood that combines forgiveness, that combines joy, that combines mercy, love, and equity. Even if many of us no longer view God as some kind of father figure, we can still appreciate the religious ideal of a good father, an impossible ideal, but an ideal which can inspire us and where we can draw strength from this ideal. This serves as an example of our Unitarian heritage. Now, to Universalism. Turning to our Universalist heritage, and I know some of the language is cringeworthy, but that's where we were, and it's part of our roots, and you can't hate the roots without hating the tree, as Malcolm X so eloquently stated. But turning to our Universalist heritage, we turn from the specific idealistic vision of fatherhood to a more fundamental principle, and that is the principle that all human beings are worthy of love. When the old Universalists spoke of the fatherhood of God, they meant that God's love must extend to all human beings, for each and every human being is worthy of love. Now, what is interesting, this is just a caveat, Theodore Parker, another Unitarian Christian minister, who also kept a gun in his pulpit to ward off slave catchers. I'll show you. No, I'm just joking. There's no gun, just a joke. He spoke of a mother-father God in his prayers. The old Universalists knew that God could not be a hateful, hurtful God with flashing eyes and a thirst for vengeance. They knew that God's core being must be love. Indeed, they said of their Father God that God is love. And I take this to mean that from their religious point of view, the essence of fatherhood is an all-encompassing, forgiving love. Their notion of fatherhood began with the love of one's own children, but it went far beyond that. Now, to be clear, old Universalists read their Bibles pretty literally. And they indeed believed that the first humans were creations of God. And therefore, in a very real sense, all of us are God's own children. All of us. Many Christian groups, however, have interpreted the Bible with the understanding that the members of their little group are the only true descendants of God, and the rest of us are simply in trouble. That love does not extend to those outside of that group. But those old Universalists knew that God's caring love extended to all people. This kind of fatherly love knows no bounds. This kind of love goes beyond one's immediate children to the entirety of humanity. And because of all humanity must be God's children, this was the basic principle of the Universalists. So that was the historical part. We might use different terminology today, well, of course we do, than those old Unitarian and Universalists used. Certainly, we have grown beyond the need to understand God as exclusively male or as exclusively a father. Now we can understand the concept of God to either include both mother and father, or not have any anthropomorphic image at all, or no human characteristics for that matter. God can be an energy, an intelligence. Call it what you will. Words get in the way. But we've come a ways from this. We can also choose to reject the concept of God completely. Nevertheless, we still draw inspiration from those old Unitarian and Universalists' God images, and inspiration we draw from, which can help us better understand the basic principles, religious principles of fatherhood. On this Father's Day, may we remember this basic religious principle, that love is the most powerful force in this multiverse. And as a religious people, as a spiritual people, as human beings, call it what you will, our mission shall be to spread the doctrine of this love. I'll tell you about two such God concepts that happen to be current in Unitarian Universalist circles today. The first is called process theology. And the process theologians, I studied this in seminary, tell us that God is changing and growing and evolving. That's why it's called process theology. Now, one could argue it. I argue kind of against it, but it means that God is in process just as we are. It's really like your younger self suddenly getting it that your dad can't fix everything in the world and that he is fallible and he's growing and he's human just as you are. That's process theology. The second strain, if you will, that you use to understand God is under the general heading of transcendentalism. I know you've heard of it. Transcendentalism is a pretty vague term these days, and it can include everyone, anyone, from Emersonians to pagans to goddess worshippers to ecological activists. Most transcendentalists see divinity in the process of nature. Some would even go so far as to say nature is God. Transcendentalists believe that the arc of the universe tends toward goodness. Transcendentalists would say that God is completely good, and the rest is up to us. And that's, again, like your younger self realizing that what your dad really offers you, really and truly, is simply his love. And pretty much everything else is going to be up to you. What about those among us who don't believe in God? Well, I'm glad you asked. There are many ways to not believe in God. But I'll just talk about the most common option that happens to be current in UU circles today. And that is something we call humanism. I would define humanism as a deep trust in the human capacity for good. Humanists also acknowledge that human beings do not always act in good ways. We don't always behave in good ways. And that means that we have to figure out how to build a society that helps us behave in the best possible way. Humanism requires of us that we work together with other human beings to address very real problems that we're facing now. Perhaps humanism can best be compared again to your younger self, coming to the long, slow, and sometimes painful realization that your dad is not superhuman, that he's human just like you, he's just another human being, and that maybe you two can work together to address some of the world's problems. And so, basically, at some point in your life, you realize that your dad can't fix everything, that your dad has faults and is fallible, but yet, hopefully, and I'm talking about in areas where there hasn't been any type of physical abuse, sexual abuse, that kind of thing. If your parents were, was really sick, that's a whole other kind of paradigm. And maybe some of you out there have had that. You've had to leave a dad or a mom because of that kind of abuse. That is acknowledged, but I'm not speaking of that here. the parents are growing and changing. And so at some point in your life, you realize that your dad, all he can offer is love, even though it must be admitted, as I said, that all parents, all dads are not capable, because of their wounds, of being able to acknowledge or share that kind of love. But that doesn't take away from the power of love. At some point in your life, you realize that your dad is fully human in all that that statement implies. My wish for fathers, and I am one now, and for all parents, is that their children, our children, grow and mature enough so that we can ask the question of our children, how can you and I fix it together? And if I had one wish on this Father's Day, this is what I would wish for, to the extent possible. Children will grow up and mature to the point where they can look us in the eye and say, let's work together to fix the things that can be fixed. No more and no less. We are both only human. And that allows us to value our parents for their goodness, and it allows parents to value themselves for their own goodness. So we would honor the human race, and we would honor ourselves by fixing what we can as best we can, so that our lives and the world we imagine can one day, someday, become the world attained. Happy Father's Day. Thank you. Our closing hymn is hymn number 122, I think. I forgot to write it down. Hymn number 122, which would be, bear with me, I think it's Sound Over All Waters. Yes, Sound Over All Waters, hymn number 122. Closing words. May beauty be our companion and courage our resolve. May integrity be our strength and kindness always be our guide. Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us. Wishing you all a wonderful Sunday afternoon and happy Father's Day to you. time to go.
Please go to the current for the link for our Zoom congregational meeting, which will start at noon today. Please do this so that we can reach a quorum and conduct the business of the church. We just do it once a year. Thank you. Bye.
I need a better system.
Okay, we're done.